Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you get a chance to watch this. This is the 14th episode of Comic Cuts on video for the 26th of June, 2020. We're halfway through the year already, but it only seems like the other day when I was putting out the Rocket book. But thinking back on it, I think the launch date of that was the 6th of April, nearly 3 months ago. The good news is that I have 2 new books in the pipeline and they're both nearly done. I've been trailering these for a couple of weeks now. It's a 2-volume set of Longbow. This was a strip that ran in Swift in the early 1960s. I'm not the world's biggest fan of westerns, but this one had some particularly beautiful artwork. There were, in fact, 12 artists over the run of the strip. I guess the one that everybody will recognise will be Don Lawrence, most famous for the Trigon Empire, of course, but an astonishingly good black and white artist in his earlier career when he did Karl the Viking and Olek the Gladiator, but also of westerns. We reprinted some years ago his work on Tales of Wells Fargo and Pony Express, which were really astonishing. And his work here on Longbow is up to that standard. Now, the other artists include Jeff Campion, who was one of the most influential artists at Fleetway. You'll recognise his style immediately when you see it. Keith Schoen, who went on to draw Braddock of the Bombers. Jesus Blasco, my favourite artist. Simple as that. He drew The Steel Claw, Slave of the Screamer, was an astonishingly versatile artist, could draw literally anything, whether it was an ultra photorealistic historical strip or the most joyful children's adventure. He could literally just draw everything. Another astonishingly good artist, Juan Gonzalez Alacruz. He painted The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and The Avengers in colour, but again, an astonishing black and white artist. The other artists include Charles Roylance, who drew for many years Captain Hurricane, but also drew Nipper for Tiger, which was an amazingly popular football strip for many years. Francisco Cueto is probably best known over here for 3 spider stories he drew for the Fleetway Super Library. We also have Jerry Haylock and Frank Humphries, both Eagle artists, but Haylock is probably best remembered as the artist of Doctor Who and UFO in Countdown. Frank Humphries, of course, Riders of the Range. One of the names you might not immediately recognise is Cesar Lopez, but you'll know his work, or you'll know of him. He was one of the artists of Shaco in early 2000 AD, and also drew Death Planet, as well as contributing to Battle Picture Weekly. So that just leaves Rodney Sutton, who was chiefly a girls strip artist and worked for girls comics for 30 plus years, and Martin Salvador, who drew Robin Hood for Thriller Picture Library, but is probably best remembered as the artist of the Iron Man in Eagle. So there are our 12 artists. Now, the books themselves will be roughly 128 pages each, and probably the price will be $13.99 plus postage. I should be able to do a special offer for people ordering both books at the same time. At the very least, there'll be combined postage, but I may be able to do a special offer, certainly at the beginning, for advance orders. So, where are we with the books? Well, as anybody who's been following these videos will know, I spent quite a lot of time relettering the volumes, and I asked somebody to proofread them to make sure that I hadn't missed anything. They came back with what was actually quite a long list of corrections that needed doing, so I spent the early part of this week on that, and then sat down and started writing the introduction. Now, I'm a couple of thousand words into that. The Longbow saga has a slightly complex history, having changed names a couple of times. So whenever you're writing an introduction, you have to know quite a lot more than what you actually finish up writing. So you become a minor expert in certain things for a very short time. So I did quite a lot of research into Mohawk Indians and the Cheyenne, the indigenous peoples of North America. Although how much of that will actually end up in the introduction, I don't know yet. you become a minor expert in this for a day or so, and then 2 days later it's all forgotten, unfortunately. Maybe enough for a pub quiz. Suddenly something will pop up in your brain, and you think, oh, where do I know that from? Oh, well, I wrote an introduction about that, or I wrote an introduction about Vikings 15 years ago, or whenever it was. So that can be quite useful. The next step is to complete the introduction. I actually don't have that much more of it to write. I'm not sure whether to write an introduction to the second volume or actually write an afterword, because while I'm introducing the history of Longbow in the first volume, he had quite a long history after the episodes that we're seeing. So it might be a case of writing an afterword to the second volume just to cover some of that history. I do like to include some detailed and interesting introductory matter and biographical matter to these volumes. Talking of biographies, each volume will include some biographical material on the 12 artists. The first volume, I think, will have 4 biographies, and the second volume will have 8. This kind of reflects the number of episodes that the artists were involved in. So the first volume will include Jeff Campion and Don Lawrence, for instance, whereas the second volume will cover artists who may have produced fewer episodes, like Humphreys, like Jerry Haylock. So that's where we are with the 2 volumes. I'm hoping that I will have layouts done within the next couple of weeks, at least of the bulk of the pages, and I might then be in a position to get proof copies of the books started. So we're not that far away. I had hoped to have them published in June. There's been a little bit of slippage, but not too much. Just as lockdown is easing, I managed to get a couple of books out, and hopefully that means that delivery of them will be rather quicker than what happened with the previous 3 books that I put out. We also have another project on the way. I'm reprinting some Gwyn Evans novels. I'm hoping that we get the covers through once lockdown has eased, and they will come out during the summer, hopefully. There is, of course, the other project, which is more of a magazine than a book, or maybe it's a bookazine. I'm not sure yet. I have to work out all the details, but it will certainly include articles and some biographical material. Certainly it'll have more of a feel of a magazine. I'm thinking that each issue will have a theme or a lead feature, which I hope will be a comprehensive look at something, whether that's a character or an artist, or maybe even a paper. I've been compiling some information and an index to the comic Jag, for instance, and I think that might be a better fit in the magazine than as a separate book. And there's other material that I've written which hasn't really found a home. I've got a history of how Italian artists started working in the UK, for instance. Would be better in a magazine than attempting to shoehorn it into a book. Hopefully over the next couple of weeks I'll be able to sit down and actually think, what are the contents of this project going to be? What would work best as a unit? How am I going to print it? Am I going to print it in colour? All sorts of questions that I still need to sit down and think about, try and come up with some answers. Obviously, if anybody has any suggestions for articles or articles that they indeed would like to write, I am very open to ideas. So I think that's all the news that I've got at the moment. Fingers crossed next week I'll have more on the Longbow books, perhaps even a publication date, and maybe some more news on other projects. So in the meantime, I hope you're continuing to stay safe. I know the lockdown is ending, but I hope everybody realises that COVID-19 is still out there. People are still catching it. People are still dying from it. What I'm hoping is that everybody will be cautious, that we won't see a second spike. But I need everybody, every one of you, to stay safe so we can all go out and see our families at the earliest possible moment. Anyway, that's it for another week. I'll see you all next week. All right, take care. Bye-bye.